Okay, joining us now on the Tilting Ground Untitled Notre Dame USC podcast is our special guest, Eric Murtaugh of OneFootDown.com. Eric, thanks for joining us.
How you doing, Greg? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. Just getting ready for this bowl game coming up, and looking forward to the matchup in the Fiesta Bowl with Ohio State. So, thanks for coming on. Just before we get into it, just wanted to talk to you guys, or talk to you a little bit about your website, One Foot Down. Funny enough, I've been following it for kind of a long time because you guys do a really good job of like breaking down blocking assignments and schemes, and you actually have fact-based analysis, which is not what Mike and I are used to. We're just kind of flying off the cuff. So it's good to have you on. I was just curious about how you guys got started, your background. You're obviously a pretty big Notre Dame fan. So just tell me a little bit about how your website started and where you're at now.
Well, thanks for the compliments about the sites. I'd like to think we do a little bit of both. We kind of fly by the seat of our pants sometimes, and we like to talk about the X's and the O's and stuff like that as well. One Foot Down was actually started by another guy in 2009. He goes by Whiskey on the internet to protect his identity. He's got somewhat of a serious job. He actually started the blog, like I said, back in 2009, initially as kind of a general college football site. It was just him kind of talking about football. He grew up in Texas, and he really loved college football. And it kind of morphed into talking more about Notre Dame. He covered Notre Dame more than anybody else, although he'd like to keep a little bit of a general focus on the nation. And we still do that today on the site. As far as where I came in, I was kind of just doing my own thing on the internet. I had my own personal blog for a while. I wrote for Bleacher Report around the same time, 2008, 2009. And then just as luck would have it, one of the old Texas sites that's on SB Nation now actually approached me and said, are you interested in writing for this Notre Dame blog called One Foot Down? And I said, I actually am. So I joined in early 2010. It was just me and Whiskey kind of running the show, two-man blog, and it's just grown tremendously since then. We were actually on a different network back then. We got picked up by SB Nation in 2011, and it's been pretty crazy since then. We have almost 30 writers now. We've got people who have started the writing on our site. They now have kids or gotten married, so it's been really neat to watch the site kind of grow up and watch everybody that writes for us grow up at the same time. So I guess that's a little bit of the history of the blog. And, it's kind of interesting. I was just thinking about this not too long ago. We used to try to write, 3 articles per week. And, and now we're, doing 2 articles per day, which is not as much as some other SB Nation sites. A lot of other sites will do 3 or 4 articles a day, but we try to do 1 to 2 every day. And it's kind of mind blowing to kind of see where it's gone in the past 5 years from, just doing 1 game recap and then not writing anything for another 5 days to just really constantly. I mean, it's a big part of my life, even though it's not my, first job, but it's been fun. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, the breakdowns are unbelievable. I was just looking at the site, getting ready for this interview. Plus I visit it every now and then because you guys have really good stuff on just like the play-by-play, breaking down matchups and that sort of thing. And I was looking at you guys really went in depth. And I think you wrote the article on the OSU running game, and how Notre Dame how you feel like Notre Dame's going to want to attack them and how Notre Dame matches up there. And you guys just did such a great job. It's amazing to me that that's not your, it's not your day job. So, it's a really good site. You guys are doing awesome work.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it does kind of take a time. We have to really plan really well. I really couldn't stress that more than anything else. When we bring in new writers, they're kind of amazed at how much we plan ahead and try to stay ahead of the game. Just can't write like something. You can't write an article like that, within a day or two. You have to kind of slowly work at it. And With the bowl season, it's kind of nice to be able to plan things ahead and have time to do stuff. So.
Yeah, I just started writing myself. So my buddy Mike and I, who do this podcast, he in the summer he was just like, "Hey, I want to start a website. Does anyone want to write?" And I was like, "Sure." I mean, I don't have a background in it. My degree is in psychology, so I mean, I've written papers in college, but nothing like this. And kind of similarly to you, I wrote some articles for Tilting Ground, and then a website called uhnd.com. They kind of approached me and asked me to write for them. So I've been doing that, like you said, just like once a week. And even then, I feel like it's hard for me to fit in. So I don't know, you guys, I don't know. I don't know how you like plan your time or anything, but obviously you're doing a great job with it. So, just curious, how did you, like, what's your background as a fan? Like, have you been a Notre Dame fan your whole life, or do you have family who's a fan, or how'd that go?
Yeah, I've been a fan my whole life. I actually grew up playing hockey. So, from age 5 until I was 19 or 20, that really took up a lot of my time. But I think Notre Dame was always lurking in the background. My dad's a fan. His dad was a fan. I don't think any of my immediate family have gone to Notre Dame, and a lot of people actually get confused and think that I'm alumni, but I'm actually not. Whiskey, who actually started the blog, isn't alumni either. I think we have about 3/4 of our writers actually are going to Notre Dame or have graduated from Notre Dame. So, I've always been a big fan of Notre Dame. It's always kind of been in my blood. I was so busy as a kid, kind of traveling all over the place playing hockey, as any kid that had played hockey knows. It's very time consuming. So I think once I got into college, I started watching every single game and kind of reading more. This is the early 2000s, so things were starting to pick up on the internet. And once I got out of college and I actually majored in government, I was like, I like to write. I wrote a lot in college, and I kind of just was like, this has always been a passion of mine, and I'm going to follow through with it and just start writing anything I can that comes to mind about Notre Dame. I'm going to write about it, and it's just taken off from there.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, I have a similar story. I mean, I grew up in Southern California, so and neither parent of mine was a fan, and my mom actually even went to USC.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So and the funny thing is that I didn't even know. I found out after we went to our first game. I mean, I just was a fan of the Rocket. I was 9 when they had the infamous Phantom clip against Colorado. That's like my first memory. So and then we went to my first Notre Dame game was in '92 against USC. And then I found out after that my mom, went there to go to dental hygiene school. So and I was actually lucky enough to I'm a fan because I'm married to her, and so I have to be like, no, like my passion goes way beyond that. So but okay, so let's get into this game. So as most people who are listening know, they've got the number 7 ranks. Ohio State's 7th, right?
Yeah, I think in every poll, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So they're the 7th ranked team in the Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Day. I want to say Ohio State, last I saw, Ohio State was favored by 6. It might have fluctuated up or down since then, but they're about a touchdown favorite. So let's just talk about, let's just start off with when Notre Dame has the ball. Curious to get your thoughts on what you think the matchup is going to be. Ohio State's lost a couple of, or at least one interior lineman in Adolphus Washington. He's been suspended for the game. And it just came out, I think it was yesterday, that Tommy Schutt, the nose tackle, he's dealing with a foot injury. So his availability is in doubt. It kind of feel like, Notre Dame's offensive line, in my opinion, is the best part of the team. It's kind of been what makes the entire offense go. there's been talk about Joey Bosa moving inside to make up for the loss of Washington. I don't know. I kind of feel like with Bosa moving inside, he's always going to be good. He's always going to be effective no matter where he is because he's such a good player. But I feel like if he was to move inside to D-tackle, that would kind of give Notre Dame advantage in the sense that, he might be matched up against Steve Elmer, who's, in the eyes of many, the weakest offensive lineman. But I feel like it might be easier for them to double team him with the guard in the center at that spot than it would be if he was out on the edge. So just curious as to how you figured that those matchups would play out, and then just Notre Dame, as a whole offensively, like how do you feel like they match up with the Ohio State defense?
Yeah, I would just kind of echo what you were talking about with the Ohio State defensive line. It was just kind of began to look at their defense, and they actually have 11 defensive tackles, but a lot of those guys are really young, and 4 of those guys are actually true freshmen who are redshirting. So a little surprised that they didn't try to work in 1 or 2 of those freshmen this year. You brought up Washington and shoot. Probably both of those not. Well, obviously Washington's not playing, and Tommy probably isn't going to play. At least that's the latest I've heard. And, they're relying on a fifth-year senior kind of converted offensive tackle. Another guy, Michael Hill, who played sparingly this year. Another redshirt sophomore, Tracy Sprinkle, who doesn't really play a whole lot. So they're almost forced to put Bosa in the middle, like you said. And I don't really know. I'm assuming he's going to play pretty well on the inside, but, that also takes away from their defensive ends as well. Even if Bosa does play pretty well on the interior, Sam Hubbard's probably going to be someone who's going to have to step up. If, some Notre Dame fans remember, he was actually a Notre Dame commit to the lacrosse program, and Notre Dame football never offered him, and he ended up decommitting from the lacrosse team and signing with Ohio State. He is a big, tall kid. He's a redshirt freshman. He's played a lot this year, but not a ton. He started in place of Bosa when Bosa was suspended for the opener. They also have another good young player, Jalen Holmes. He's a true sophomore. But, there's just not really a whole lot of proven guys up front for Ohio State. And like you said, the offensive line for Notre Dame is really the strong point. I'm hoping that Notre Dame can come out and establish the run right away. I kind of feel like, in the big games that Notre Dame's played under Brian Kelly, whenever they're not able to run the ball at least competently, things tend to fall apart. We kind of panic and throw the ball a lot more. We're not very patient with the run game. So I think, coming out in those first 2 series, and if Notre Dame's able to run the ball, I think they're going to be able to do, a lot of what they've done this year on offense, and that's, move the ball really well and put up a lot of points. Ohio State's secondary and linebackers are really good. I think it's a little bit tougher to kind of project how that's going to play out for Notre Dame. Obviously, Kaiser is still fairly inexperienced and kind of young and still growing. I think it's going to be interesting to see how much better he is after a month of practices and to see how much they utilize him in the passing game. Obviously, we know he runs the ball a lot. So, I think it's going to be a really good matchup. I expect it to be high scoring on both sides. So I don't come into this game thinking that Ohio State's going to completely shut Notre Dame down or it's going to be a really tough time for Notre Dame. But, red zone offense, it's been a problem all year. So we'll see if Notre Dame settles for field goals or is scoring touchdowns. And, maybe that's the difference, maybe not. But I think they're going to be able to move the ball against this front and hopefully stay patient with the running game and work some stuff off of play action.
Yeah, I'm going to get to red zone in just 1 second there, but just to put a bow on the defensive line issues for Ohio State, I feel like anytime you take a guy like Bosa, and you take him from his position that he's used to playing and where he's most effective, and you move him inside, it's almost like you're getting worse at 2 positions like that because now he's not as effective playing inside. It's not what he's used to doing. It's not that he's not good. It's almost like when, like we saw with USC earlier in the year when they lost their center and they moved their starting guard to center. It's like now you have two backups, essentially. You have a backup at center and you have a backup at guard, where it's like if you just put in the backup center, then you would just have, one backup essentially. So I'm always kind of dubious when teams do that. Again, I was actually really curious to see how Mike McGlinchey would go against, how he would fare against Joey Bosa, because I feel like Mike McGlinchey might have been Notre Dame's best lineman this year. I mean, he's not their best player. I mean, Ronnie Stanley's better than him, but just in terms of performance, I feel like Mike McGlinchey might have had just as strong a season, if not stronger. So, hopefully we still get to see that a little bit. I'm curious to get your thoughts on, we've got a couple players returning from injury.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of an impact do you think, if at all, like CJ Prosise will play in this game? And how much do you think it matters? Because, I mean, we saw Josh Adams against Pitt, who he got a ton of carries. Obviously, he played really well in that game, and that's a really good defense. Mm-hmm. Wake Forest, he obviously had the 98-yarder. Other than that, they kind of shut him down a little bit. And then against Stanford, I mean, he had a huge game. So, do you think it's a big thing that CJ Prosise might still be a little banged up? Because Kelly kind of alluded to, maybe he wasn't as far along as, they would want him to be in terms of his health.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm almost positive he's not going to be 100%, but I think he's going to be fairly healthy compared to, where he was towards the end of the season. Obviously, it's a pretty badly sprained ankle, and, he only got his cast off not too long ago. But I think just for one game and being able to rest, as long as he's been able to rest, that he'll be okay. I think he's a big key, if only because, what does Notre Dame do if Josh Adams gets hurt in this game in the first quarter? Now you're down to basically one running back, a true freshman who hasn't played nearly as much as Josh Adams. So right. I think from that perspective, it's really nice to have Prosise back. And obviously Prosise has been a tremendous playmaker for Notre Dame this year. And, he can do a lot of different things. And having him and Adams again as a 1-2 punch is great. So as long as he's, 85, 90%, and, this isn't one of those things where he's going to come out and get 2 carries and the ankle's too injured still and he's not going to play, I think it's going to be a pretty big boost for Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of the next injury, player coming back from injury on offense, and it kind of gets into the red zone thing, is Durham Smythe at tight end. Kelly's been really complimentary of, the way he's kind of come back into the fold in practice with his, I guess, knee and shoulder injuries. How much do you think that will play? I mean, how effective do you think he can be? I mean, I just wonder with any player who's missed this much time, like coming back off of like 3 months of not playing football,
yeah,
and now he's going against Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl. Like, it's just, I don't know. It always makes me a little bit nervous. And if he can come in, I feel like and be effective, I think it's so important for the red zone offense, just because, I feel like with their packages that they had, when Alize Jones is in the game, you feel like they're going to throw. And when Tyler Luatua is in the game, you feel like they're going to run. And I feel like with Durham Smythe in there, you can kind of go 2 ways there. There's no tendency there.
Yeah, definitely.
So, how big of a role do you think he'll play? Because red zone offense, I mean, they fumbled once against Clemson, and they ended up coming back and scoring anyway. So I mean, they would have needed the 2-point conversion anyway. But I mean, you don't have Durham Smythe to throw a 2-point conversion to or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, red zone offense definitely cost them the Stanford game. So how big a role do you think that'll play? And what do you think about just kind of the overall offensive philosophy down there?
Yeah, I think I like what you were saying about when Smythe's out there, you kind of aren't really telling or telegraphing to the defense what you're going to do. I am pretty skeptical about two things with Smythe. The first one being, I'm not really sure how much he's going to play. You know, he's been out for such a long time, and you know, he was the number one tight end, but I don't think he was the number one tight end by a mile compared to some of the other players. And you know, Alize Jones has had a whole season of playing, and you know, even someone who like Chase Hounshaw, who I didn't even think was going to play this year, got, you know, over 100 snaps. Luatua, Wisher, both playing a lot this year. So I don't know if, you know, Smythe's going to come in during bowl prep and just go right to the top of the heap. And, you know, they're going to be spending all this time, you know, figuring out the red zone with him being kind of like the main guy down there. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. And I'm also a little bit skeptical about a tight end really making that much of a difference. I think if this was Tyler Eifert we're talking about, or Kyle Rudolph, then I would say, okay, a little bit more of a proven playmaker, you know, a little bit taller, you know, really an instant impact type of a player. So outside of the quarterback position, I don't know if, you know, Notre Dame can get one guy back, and that's really going to help them out tremendously, especially against a top tier team like Ohio State. You know, actually one of our writers is looking into the red zone offense and kind of just breaking down our tendencies and exploring what we do right and kind of what he thinks we do wrong. And he's about halfway through that. And if I could just share with you, one of the things that he talked about is that, you know, he says, like, once we get kind of inside the 20 and we're still a little bit further away from the end zone, he feels like we're a little bit too aggressive down there. We try to go for a kill shot. And I know that's a criticism of the Brian Kelly offense it's been there for 5 or 6 years. You know, it's 3rd and 2, and we kind of try to throw a low percentage pass down the sidelines, you know, to a covered receiver or jump ball, you know, stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. You know, you're at the 18-yard line and it's 2nd and 8, and you try to throw a touchdown pass instead of maybe running the ball again and getting 5 yards and setting yourself up for a 3rd and short and getting another extra set of downs. So I think that plays a part. You know, just me personally, I think a lot of people like to talk about the short yardage running and the power running and stuff like that. And I think that's important, but I think if you looked at red zone offenses all across the country and kind of just look back at recent history, that quarterback play is just really important down there. You know, you've got teams like Wisconsin who are power running teams, and in some of these years where they don't really have a really good quarterback, they kind of stall out in the red zone just because there's not a passing threat to help out the running game down there. And you look at an offense like Alabama this year, I mean, tremendous running game, but kind of a average quarterback. So they don't really have a great red zone offense as well. So, you know, Kaiser's made a bunch of mistakes down there, which is kind of to be expected. You know, I think we've improved running the ball down there, and Kaiser adds a little bit more of a dimension with all the quarterback power runs that he's able to do. But, you know, you really need your quarterback to be able to make big throws. You need him to make good decisions and not turn the ball over. And I think that's really been the missing piece for Notre Dame, you know, not really going into any offseason with the same quarterback. It's always been a problem. Hopefully, well, I shouldn't say hopefully, but, you know, Kaiser probably has a step up now on Zaire going into this offseason. So, you know, I think they just need better quarterback play overall to start scoring touchdowns there more often than not.
You know, you bring up a really good point about how they go for the kill a little too early. I don't remember specifically, but I remember on one occasion in the Stanford game, I want to say it was like 1st and goal from maybe the 9 or something, and they ran for 4, and then they had 2 straight incomplete passes. And you just wonder, you know, if you can run it again and, you know, get down to the 2 or the 3. I mean, you can almost set yourself up to go for it on 4 downs there if you don't lose yards on 3rd down, if you want to run it or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. Just kind of, you know, setting yourself up for more success. And you make a really good point about, you know, some of the top teams. You know, another team, I wrote an article for UHND, and I was kind of looking at the red zone stats for you know, some of the top teams. I want to say Clemson was in the 90s too. Clemson didn't have a great red zone offense, and as you said, Bama didn't either. So, it's one of those things. I mean, Notre Dame. Against Stanford, they scored 36 points. So, you score 36, you should be beating most teams. But they could definitely improve. You don't want to be in the 80s like Notre Dame was in red zone touchdown percentage. So,
yep.
I think it's a really good point you bring up about how it just seems like every year they've got a new quarterback in there who just doesn't have full knowledge of the offense. And I think that shows in some of Kaiser's turnovers. He's had a couple of turnovers down there that have just been, on first and second down in the red zone, and it just kind of shows a lack of understanding down there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you bring up a good point with that one. So moving over to when Ohio State has the ball, I'm gonna need you to cheer me up a little bit, because when I think about it, I just don't see how Notre Dame can stop an Ohio State team that has this long to look at their weaknesses and figure out ways to exploit them. And Notre Dame's got some real weaknesses. I'm not gonna. I feel like Joe Schmidt's been picked on enough, but
right.
The fact of it is that he basically plays all the snaps, and he had 65 tackles. So they're just not getting a lot of production from the middle linebacker position, and they've got a couple safeties that can get fooled.
Right.
I guess is the best way to put it.
Uh-huh.
Or just kind of confused. Maybe they're not getting tricked. Maybe they just don't really know. And then you've got Devin Butler on the corner. So I just don't have a good solution for how Notre Dame's going to keep, I kind of just hope they keep Ohio State in the 30s and hope we can just kind of outscore them. So, what are you seeing on that side of the ball?
Well, I'm similarly pessimistic about this matchup. I think maybe one thing that I kind of try to cheer myself up with is that Notre Dame's going to come out with a really good game plan, and I'm not going to say they're going to outcoach Urban Meyer, but the one thing that I think, if Notre Dame wins this game, I think it might be because JT Barrett doesn't really have a great passing game, and like you said, the secondary has a number of issues. Not having Russell out there is not good for Notre Dame. But the way I kind of look at it is, if we can hold Ohio State kind of to 250, 270 yards rushing, if we can kind of just stem the tide against the run game and not open ourselves up to situations where they're just doing whatever they want in the run game and they kind of picking their spots in the passing game, and we're all mixed up. I think, that's kind of like the doomsday scenario for Notre Dame. And we kind of walk away from this game with Ohio State scoring 48 points or whatever. So, yeah, I think it's going to be tough. Urban Meyer having a whole month to prepare, JT Barrett, I kind of believe that they made a big mistake not starting Barrett all season long. It was amazing to me how long they stuck with Cardell Jones at quarterback. And in that article you referenced in the beginning of this podcast, it's just amazing to me that Urban Meyer basically came out and said we're not much of a read option team anymore. That's been his entire offense for 15 years, and to just kind of walk away from that for someone like Cardell Jones, he's talented, but I don't think he's ever really proven, over 10 games or more that he is some dynamic playmaker at quarterback, whereas I think JT Barrett has really proven that. He's a much better runner, and he can be a pretty good passer, when given time. So I think this is a scary matchup. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it. JT Barrett's talented. Elliott's one of the best running backs. Braxton Miller's out there doing 7 different things for them. They've got a pair of, I should say, three different kind of hybrid backs that can do a lot of great things out there. Michael Thomas is an underrated receiver.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be tough. They got a good offensive line. They've all started the entire season. They really haven't had much injuries on their entire roster, and especially on offense, there just really hasn't been any injuries. So these guys are used to playing with each other, and I definitely think with Barrett running the show in a whole month to prepare, it's going to be tough for Notre Dame. There's no way to get around that.
Yeah, the thing that really worries me, even more so, is the fact that, Ohio State has looked bad. Well, I don't want to say bad. They've been underwhelming in a lot of games this year, offensively. Not as much with Barrett at quarterback, although, they look putrid against Michigan State. And granted, that game was in the rain, but Notre Dame had 430 yards of offense in a monsoon. So it's not like you can't do it, especially at home. But I feel like in these bowl games, especially when they don't have the tension as just an offensive, from an offensive coordinator standpoint, they don't have the tension of, playing for a BCS, or not a BCS, but a college football playoff spot.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that anymore. So I feel like they could open up their offense, probably more than they have in the past. And, take a little bit more chances, take more chances deep. And that's the sort of thing that I feel like, the Notre Dame defense is vulnerable to that stuff. I feel like they need a team, like a perfect example is Clemson, right? When they played against Clemson and Clemson got up quick, 14-0 right off the bat, I felt like Clemson kind of kept it conservative at that point, which allowed Notre Dame's defense to kind of gain some traction on them. And, Clemson hit a couple big plays, here and there after that, some 30, 40-yard plays. But, Notre Dame, for the most part, kept them out of the end zone with the exception of the one kind of big Watson run in the first possession of the second half. But generally, they just kind of shut it down. And I feel like, Notre Dame fans and, even me, you look at that Clemson game, it's well, other than the first 7 minutes, Notre Dame played really hard or they played really well. And it's yes, they did. But, Clemson also, they had a lead in the conditions that they were in. They didn't have to chase the game. They didn't have to push the game anymore. And I feel like Notre Dame needs a team like Ohio State to be playing a little bit conservative. And I don't feel like they will in this game. And that's the thing that just, like you said, I could just see them coming out for 48 points, and just kind of blitzing them. And it's I don't know that Notre Dame's offense is going to be able to, score 6 touchdowns against this team.
Yeah. That's an interesting point because, there's a lot of people on our site that are saying, Ohio State really didn't do a whole lot this year. And like you said, they weren't really super impressive most of the season. To me, and I think this is going to be a big part of my game preview in a couple weeks, Ohio State was exhibiting a lot of signs of a championship hangover, of a team that kind of took for granted how good they are. And I think that's just human nature. They look at their schedule and they say, we're not going to be challenged until mid-November. And then you just throw on top of that, Tom Herman leaving, that kind of changed things on their offense. The whole situation at quarterback. So there's all these things that kind of came together for Ohio State that you look at it and say, it's not really that surprising that they weren't some epic dominating team that was going to just collide their way to a second championship in a row. I think it's pretty easy to diagnose kind of what went wrong with them this year. But like you said, they can turn it on, and they did against Michigan. And I think that's kind of what has me worried personally is that, it's not like this team isn't talented or they're not healthy. Obviously the defensive tackle situation is a big worry for them. But besides that, this team is loaded. They have Urban Meyer, who's been, almost unbeatable in bowl games. And I would imagine they're going to be super fired up. Most teams don't like Notre Dame,
No.
and I imagine these Ohio State players aren't going to like Notre Dame, and they're going to want to win this game. And I think a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I think there's a certain segment of Notre Dame fans that think that maybe Ohio State's going to be disappointed that they're not in the playoff, and they're going to be kind of just going through the motions, and some of their players kind of just looking towards NFL. And I think it's going to be the exact opposite. I think they're going to come out fired up.
Yeah, I just can't count on a team to enter any game against Notre Dame and think that they're going to be flat.
Right.
I don't know that I've ever seen it. It just, like, in my 25 years of watching, it just doesn't happen. And the thing is like we've kind of just been hitting on it. We've seen the ceiling of what Ohio State can do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when they're at their best, they're beating Alabama and they're beating Oregon in the national title game. Like, we know what their ceiling is, and we don't really know. We haven't seen Notre Dame's ceiling yet. Like, they've played 2 top 10 teams and they lost to both of them.
Yep.
And, whether it was by 2 plays or, 1 play or however you want to put it, they lost. They didn't win. So I'm not saying they can't, and, it sounds like I'm being really pessimistic about it, but it just like that's how, I have to be objective, and just looking at it, like, it just worries me that I haven't seen Notre Dame go to that place of just being the better team in a matchup like this, and we've seen it from Ohio State. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on that. I don't think it would be a huge surprise if Notre Dame won the game, but you kind of look at everything. I always try to take like a big picture, step away from it.
Yeah.
What would I think about if you told me in August that Notre Dame would be playing Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl? Well, I would say that's going to be a really tough game, and I just don't think there's any way that an Urban Meyer coached team with this amount of talent is going to come out and lay an egg. They're going to come out and be on point and ready to go right from the first snap. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, because if you look at the advanced stats of it, like, Notre Dame's offense matches up. They in a lot of areas they've been better. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame is such an advanced stats team this year. Like, they've been so good, and people talk about how it's akin to the 02 team or the 06 team. It's really not. Like, if you just look at them from just how they've played, record aside, I mean, they've been so much better. I mean, they got 2 consensus All-Americans on this team. So I feel like this is a much better Notre Dame team than we've seen in the last I don't know how long, 20 years. But they have to perform. You can't just be good. You have to actually win these games. So hopefully they've got it in them. We'll see.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. The advanced stats have loved Notre Dame all season, especially offensively. They've just been so dynamic. Yards per play have been through the roof. Even scoring overall, more of a traditional stat, has been great this year. Even with the red zone woes, you just kind of imagine what it would have been like if they had scored more touchdowns. So I think that's where hope lies for Notre Dame. Is they're not really overwhelmingly overmatched in this game. I don't think there's some things with their offense going against Notre Dame's defense, like we've talked about, that are really all that great. But if we come out and play really well on offense, maybe we score 45 points and we win by a touchdown or whatever. So I don't think it's going to be a blowout either way. I think it's going to be close, but Ohio State's talented, and they've been here before. A lot of these guys were on the team last year, so it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Notre Dame can, if they can pull it out, I think it's. I mean, I don't think it sinks the program if they lose, but I think if they manage to win this game, I mean, it kind of changes, the trajectory of the program for sure, in a really good way. So they have a great opportunity, to end the season on a good note against a good team. And then they got a lot of guys coming back. they can make a run at it next year. And speaking of guys coming back, so Notre Dame's got some guys who have some a decision to make as far as the draft goes. I'll mention Ronnie Stanley and Jalen Smith, but I don't think either of us thinks that they're going to be playing for Notre Dame next year. Ronnie Stanley for sure. I've not seen one person who thinks there's any doubt that Jalen Smith will be in the draft.
Yeah, Stanley has already come out and said that he's leaving, and it's going to be tough for Jalen. People said, if we lose this game, is he going to be motivated to come back and try to win a national championship? Or if he wins, is he going to be motivated to come back and win a national championship? You don't know how a player is going to react to that, but look at all these mock drafts. He's gone ahead of Stanley in a lot of these mock drafts. A lot of talk about him being top 10, maybe even top 5, maybe even a top, number 1 overall pick, which would just be crazy. I don't think there's any way he's going to stare that in the face and want to come back, nor do I think he should come back. So
no, I haven't seen him in one outside the top 10, and right. He just can't. And frankly, just with the way he's been used, it's not like they've been turning him loose and letting him kind of, stretch his legs. He's playing next. He's playing out of position. He should be playing the Sam, and he's playing the Will. The guy has 1 sack this year. He could have at least 5 or 6. So, he's going to go, and he should go. But to guys whose future is a little bit more iffy, you've got Will Fuller at receiver. You've got Kavari Russell. You've got CJ Prosise. And I think that's it, right? I'm not skipping anyone, am I?
Yeah, those were the 5 guys who are still have eligibility, and they have applied for their NFL draft grade things or whatever they call it.
Right. So I guess let's start with the best one, I guess. So let's Will Fuller. So he originally came out in November and said he was going to come back for his senior year. And then the next day, Brian Kelly kind of came out in his press conference and said, well, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Let's just kind of go through the process here. And then I think everyone kind of expected that he would. And so then at the award show banquet, they asked him about it, and he said, well, I'm undecided. So, what do you think about it? I guess let me hear your thoughts, and then I'll kind of chime into what I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough decision for him, I think. I'm not really an expert on where all the other receivers are in the mock drafts and stuff like that. I tend to think, since he's already made that statement about coming back, that's going to kind of pull on him a little bit. I don't think he's going to do very well at the combine with his hands and a lot of the drills that they do to involve his hands. So from that perspective, I could see him I know he's probably going to run a scorching 40, and that's going to be obviously the thing he's going to be able to hang his hat on. But he's still undersized. He really doesn't have good hands for a receiver. And, if it comes back and they say you're probably I think the way they do it now is they either say you're a first-round pick, you're a second-round pick, or you're a third or later. They don't really specify if you're like a fifth-round pick. So if they say third round or later, I think in my mind he's probably going to elect to come back for another year. I don't think, that's going to be enough for him to want to leave. So I would imagine that's kind of he's probably second round or third. I don't think he's a first-round pick. So especially with some of the other guys kind of off the top of my head, like Doxson at TCU and the kid at Baylor. These guys are much bigger. Yeah, much bigger and better hands, and I think a little bit more worthy of a top selection. I think another year for Fuller to try to play his way up that high, it would be good for him. And I think it's going to be too hard to resist to come back and be kind of like the alpha dog at receiver for 2016.
Yeah, and you've also got Laquan Treadwell from from Ole Miss coming out, and people love him. I tend to agree with everything you said. I think that when he was asked, it seems like he's not really ready, just kind of as where he is in his life to go to the NFL. I just don't like when you ask someone like that and they say, oh yeah, I'm coming back. It's like, I feel like he feels like I'm still a college player. And you kind of see Jalen, like he's the exact opposite. It's like, oh yeah, he's got a little smirk on his face. Like, oh yeah, we'll see. I just want to beat Ohio State. He knows. And I feel like Will, I think that he knows that he has things to work on. Like you said, I mean, he has to have like the worst hands of any good receiver that I've ever seen. I mean, he double catches all the time.
Yeah.
If he doesn't outright drop it. And then he's also like has to be one of the fastest receivers I've ever seen. I mean, I've never seen a guy just run straight go routes and no one can keep up with him. Mm-hmm. I feel like he can get stronger. I feel like he can become more of a red zone threat. He can add that to his game a little bit.
Yep.
And he can clean up his routes as well. So, I think he could probably, and the thing is when you got this 40, what if he goes and has a bad day at the combine or something, and just for some reason he doesn't feel that good, he feels a little tight or something, and he doesn't run that fast of a 40. And it's like, well, now it's like, I mean, if he's in the 4.4s, it's like, well, okay, like he's not that fast, like he didn't, and he still has bad hands. So, you're kind of a bad 40 away from going from like a second round pick to a third round pick. Mm-hmm. So I think just in my read of it, which is, completely on the outside, he seems like a kid who, isn't ready to be in the NFL yet, and he's going to come back next year.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the whole red zone issue is big too. Kind of Notre Dame would get down there and he would disappear a little bit. Sometimes you get a screen to him or whatever, but I think he has to improve on catching in traffic, catching over the middle, and kind of more short intermediate routes. He's actually seemed to have done a pretty good job on slants for how bad his hands are, even though he'll tend to catch balls with his body too. But I don't think he's really afraid of being physical, but it's just not really in his nature to be that type of receiver. I think, as fans, it can be difficult to kind of assess where these guys are in their lives, but he's not very big. He's very young looking and he's very quiet. And I think that kind of plays into the whole thinking that, he's not really ready to leave college yet. So I would just imagine he's probably a pretty mature kid, but it's just kind of hard to imagine him being in an NFL locker room next year, coming out after his junior year. So
it is hard to imagine that. Yeah. Picture.
Yeah. So I think he'll probably come back, but who knows? We've been surprised before.
That's a good point. And Procyse's situation to me is probably the most, I honestly just don't know, because he's in a bad spot. He needs more carries. So, like, if Tarian Folston wasn't going to be on the team next year, I feel like it's no-brainer you come back and you split time with Adams. But Tarian Folston is going to be on the team next year. And, Procyse needs more carries to become a better back.
Right.
Can he get those carries next year at Notre Dame? Can he even get to 100? That's the thing. I mean, I just don't know how many carries there are available to him. Will they try to put him in the slot again? Because he's another guy. He doesn't have the best hands.
Yeah.
So it's like, could he go to the NFL and create a niche as a third down back? He doesn't catch the ball that great. So, but then, the NFL has only seen him play in an offense where, the holes are gaping, and he can, he's athletic enough and he's good enough to where, you give him space and he's going to hurt you. But like, is he going to have that? in the pros? Probably not. I mean, so he needs to refine his game. And I feel like he needs to come back because he needs to become a better running back so that when he goes to the NFL, he's ready to take on that role, I guess. So maybe he can't improve his draft position, but he can prove himself as a player so that when he gets there, he sticks.
Right.
But it's hard to sell that to somebody who it's like he just doesn't know how much work he's going to get next year. So I honestly, I don't even know what the best move is for him.
Yeah, this one's going to be really fascinating. The thing, that I think might kind of decide what he's gonna do is what he's hearing from the NFL scouts and stuff like that. Do they see him as a running back first of all? Do they see him as someone who can come in as a rookie and stay on a roster as a running back, or do they see him as someone who's going to be a long-term project, who's going to be a returner, and eventually, after maybe his third year, he's going to get into the running back rotation for a team, and then on the other side is, like you said, what's Notre Dame going to do with him if he comes back? Now you've got 3 experienced running backs. Josh Adams went over 100 carries, so that's 3 guys who have at least carried the ball 100 times. I just wrote about this on our site. What do you do? Notre Dame's really never had this problem, especially under Brian Kelly. It's always been, we've got tight ends and receivers and not enough running backs. Now we've got 3 running backs. Do we change the offense a little bit? Do we go in and play more 2 running back sets, which Brian Kelly has never really done to any great degree? If you put Procise in the slot again, does he want to do that? Does he want to, say, hey, I want to develop myself as a running back. I don't want to be a hybrid player. I know I don't have great hands. My future is going to be as a running back. I don't want to do that. So, it's such a fascinating situation because it's like, I don't think he's really ever going to get all that high in the draft because of his position that he plays.
Right.
And I tend to agree that he needs to work on being a running back and get better at being a running back so that when he does go to the NFL, that he doesn't get thrown into a situation where, maybe he thinks he's going to get picked in the 3rd round, but he falls to like the late 5th and then he doesn't make a roster. I think I wouldn't predict that to happen, but, I don't think it's going to be – if he were to leave this year, I don't think it would be totally unlike George Atkinson leaving and, like, well, he can be a returner but end up not making a team. I think that can be a scary situation for somebody. I don't think you want to enter your NFL career on that foot. I would definitely come back and, get better at running back because, it just seems so crazy to me. I never would have imagined that he'd be in this situation getting drafted as a running back in the third round. It seemed like just yesterday he was a safety at Notre Dame, and now it's amazing to me. So I have, I don't know what he's going to do, but I'm fascinated to see kind of how it all plays out.
Yeah, and Dexter Williams, like he's not terrible either. So they just got so many. The good thing for Procise is that he's got a special teams value. Wasn't he Notre Dame's special teams player of the year 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's for his tackling. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was. So that he's got that going for him. He can make a roster, and he's not just a running back.
Right.
So that's good. He's got that going for him. But yeah, I think we're on the same page. It's just a weird situation. It's a good situation for fans to have.
Yeah.
The funny thing is Adams might be the best of all of them. That's the crazy part. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see it play out.
Yeah, I don't know how you can go into next year and tell Josh Adams, you're going to get 3 carries a game until Folston or Procise get hurt. I just don't see how you can put someone like that in that position. That's gonna be crazy offseason. Yeah,
and then you've got Russell. For me, just from a playing standpoint, he needs to come back. He was not that good this year. I don't see how he gets drafted before the 5th round. I mean, the guy's on tape in the Showtime series admitting to Coach Kelly that he's dogging it in practice for the first 6 weeks. He was kicked out of school, you know, for an academic situation, you know, whatever that was. But he doesn't seem like a guy who even wants to be in school anymore. So, you know, and then he's got this NCAA thing and he's got to appeal. Like, who knows when they'll rule. So, I mean, I feel like he's got to come out just because, A, he probably doesn't want to be in school anymore, and B, like he has no idea if he's even going to be eligible. So strictly from a playing standpoint, he should probably return, but I don't see how he does.
Yeah, he's had quite the funny career, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I feel bad for him, but it just kind of seems like his whole redemption season hasn't really taken off. Hasn't taken off at all. You know, I was always beating the drum that it was way too premature to call him a shutdown corner after 2013. You know, I thought he was a solid corner. I thought he was a good corner, but I don't think he's ever really flashed, you know, first round potential. You know, there was some stuff during his suspension of him training and running a really great 40 and doing all this crazy physical stuff. And, you know, I don't have any doubt that he'll do pretty well at the combine, but just overall, I don't think he had a good, at times he had a good season, but I just don't really see him being, like you said, a corner who's going to be going in the top 4 rounds, but I don't really think he has much of a choice now. The whole NCAA thing, I don't think he can afford to just wait and hear back from them. And I think mentally he's probably ready to move on. I have always gotten that sense out of him that, you know, with the suspension and coming back, and it seems like he's been at Notre Dame a lot longer than he has. So I think he's probably ready to move on and, you know, kind of just take his chances with NFL draft and hope he makes a team and has some sort of an NFL career. You know, there's worse things in the world than playing in the NFL for only 3 years, but I definitely think he's probably gone.
Yeah. I mean, even so, like, I feel like, you know, with Sean Crawford and Nick Coleman and, you know, even Nick Watkins, I feel like whoever you pair with Cole Luke next year might even be an upgrade. So just from an attitude standpoint.
Right.
So one last thing, and then I'll let you go. Just kind of, I feel like Notre Dame, you know, coming into this year, I think a lot of fans felt like it was a kind of a make or break year for Kelly. And, I mean, definitely, given all the seasons, given all the injuries, to play the way that they did, I feel like it was just a really good performance. And, you know, going forward, I feel like with the youth on this team, with what they've done in recruiting, I feel like, I feel as good about the program as I have in, you know, my time following the team. Just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, they definitely checked off a lot of the boxes that I was kind of laying out this season that they kind of needed to do. Like you said, this was kind of a tipping point, I thought, for Brian Kelly in his 6th year. You know, this couldn't have been another season where you won 8 games in the regular season and then we went into another offseason kind of debating everything about the program. You know, I've always said that Brian Kelly's whole tenure has kind of been this big gray area for Notre Dame. You know, he's leaps and bounds better than the previous 3 coaches, but, you know, he hasn't won a national championship, which, you know, that's fine. You can't just simply judge a coach off of that, but they still haven't won a major bowl game. You know, they haven't strung together multiple double-digit win seasons, which I think is the next step. You know, that'll be a big goal for next year. Yeah. And a goal that I think that they can achieve. But, you know, he's just always been stuck in this like middle ground. And it's always like, you know, one game kind of pulls him back and then another game kind of pulls him forward. But overall, it's a very positive picture for the program. You know, recruiting starting to heat up. I think if they can beat Ohio State, obviously they'll close really strong. I still think they're not going to be quite in the top 10. We'll see how they finish. You know, if they can nab a 5-star, then maybe they will. But I think they took a little bit too many 3 stars early on in the process to hold on to a top 10. So I can see them falling to about 12th in recruiting, which is still really good, but not a great season. But, I guess the last thing I would say is that I didn't really want to play Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl just because of the fact that I'm not sure, and I don't know if this will come out right. I don't know if we're ready for that type of a matchup this year. We were very injured. We played well despite the injuries, and I just think it's really crappy luck overall to be 10-2 and then just fall into the lap of maybe the most talented team in the country. I was kind of more thinking we would get Iowa and, be a much more favorable matchup and get our 11th win and, have next year be a much more amped up year and people saying, maybe we could win a national title. Maybe this is actually the year. And I'm a little bit worried about what a loss to Ohio State does to the program. Maybe not so much from like a national perspective. I think a lot of national people respect Notre Dame a lot more than they did in the past. I think they respect Brian Kelly, and they're not going to look at this game and be, shocked if we lose by 10 and think that we're just a big fraud. But I think kind of within the Notre Dame fan base, there's going to be a little bit more grumbling about this past season. I think everyone is happy with what happened with the injuries and overcoming that. But at the end of the day, if they finish 10-3, your best wins are Navy and Temple and a 5-loss Southern Cal team, and you lost to basically the top 3 teams you played. I think a little bit of doubt will creep in, and that's going to be a kind of frustrating to deal with. But overall, I think the program's on a good positive plane right now. And if they beat Ohio State, I think it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be sunshines and rainbows because we haven't had an off season like that in such a long time. But definitely a really fun off season for Notre Dame if they beat Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, they always do seem to get, like, anytime they're in one of these big games, they always get that one team that is just the sleeping giant, know. Every year this happens. Like they couldn't get Iowa, and they couldn't, why couldn't they get like Florida State or something,
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, to get something, you got to do something. And I guess, that's just kind of how I have to look at it because, they are matched up with them. But I mean, I agree. Like, it doesn't really matter if they lose this game. It doesn't matter how good their metrics look or, how many yards per carry. I mean, you 0 for 3 against the top 10 teams you played. Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. Like, they just like you said, just for their own kind of psyche, like, to go into next season knowing like, okay, we've done it. Like, we've played at the level that we need. Like, we've played championship level football. Mm-hmm. And won. I feel like they've played championship level football this year, but they've lost. And I feel like they need to do it and win the game, to kind of go into next year with that, okay, like now we've done it. Let's go win them all, it's a monstrous game for them. I don't think it, I mean, unless they got blown away, which I just don't really see. Mm-hmm. I feel like they can score enough points to where they wouldn't just get blown out of the game. But, and I still, I think we can both come up with a scenario for which they'll win. But, I mean, for the reasons you stated, it's just a massive game for Notre Dame fan base. And, for the prospects going into next season. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for our little chat here, Eric.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on. What's your, it's onefootdown.com.
Right.
And is it, One Foot Down's got its own Twitter, right?
Yep. It's just at 1 Foot Down.
Okay. At 1 Foot Down. And do you have a Twitter page yourself?
Yeah, I am at Murtaugh OFD. So E and then my last name with a capitalized OFD on the end.
Okay. All right. So follow him. He's got, I was following your Twitter last night. You got some fun little tweets going on there and always entertaining. And all your articles are posted on there as well. So you can give him a follow. And, you can see all the great content that 1 Foot Down's got coming out weekly, daily. And You can follow me at Greg2126. We're taping this on Friday, December 18th. It'll probably go up sometime early next week, Monday or Tuesday. So that's when people are going to get it. Hopefully nothing big breaking news happens between now and then. So this podcast isn't dated, but I really enjoyed this. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully maybe we can set something up maybe after signing day. We can get you on again. We can talk about, all the recruits and, how the bowl game went and look forward to next season.
Sure. That sounds great.
All right, man. Have a good weekend. And if I don't talk to you, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
All right. Same to you. Go Irish.
Go Irish.